Hello. Um, I intend this video to be just a little bit reflective, and this isn't pre-planned. It's kind of spontaneous. I mean, the subject isn't spontaneous. I wanted to talk about this, but I've got no script. I've got no plan, and that's what I tend to do with my videos in general because I think it's more candid that way. Just talking about just talking, basically. Um, You know, when I turn on my laptop and I go to my MSN homepage or my Yahoo homepage, I'm bombarded with news stories that are negative, right? Murders, terrorism, war, human rights abuses. Um, when you see negative news, and I think there's a real psychology involved in this actually, it can be very easy to get cynical and very easy to feel gloomy about the world. The truth of the matter is, the world's always had problems. I don't think it's a case of, sometimes you hear, oh, what's the world coming to? But the world's always had problems. The world's always had these issues in particular. And I think each generation has particularly unique challenges. For example, there's things connected with social media and the internet that wouldn't have existed 20 years ago, which just adds a new dynamic. I think the only way to not get utterly depressed about the state of the world in this sense is to consider that the world's a small place in one sense, but it's a big place in another sense. It's small in the sense that it's interconnected, that we're the pale blue dot, you know, um, in a vast universe. But it's big in the sense that the universal situation is never all bad or all good. So, for example, I could look at any number of negative things that are going on in the news. I could look at the situation in Xinjiang. I could look at the report I heard yesterday about the two accused adulterers being flogged till they passed out in Aceh province in Indonesia. I can talk about crimes in this country. I can talk about any number of negative things. But then I think, well, that development in Sudan is good news. With repeal of backward laws, that's a good thing. That's to be welcomed. Um, Elections are always really depending on your perspective, whether they're good or bad, in terms of, I mean, democracy is always superior to totalitarianism, but the outcome of an election really comes down to your personal preference or your what you think is ideologically the right way forward. And obviously, if the party or the movement that you support gets in, that's a cause for optimism. If it doesn't, it's a cause for pessimism. So there's a lot of ways to look at these things. I sometimes think that when it comes to morality and ethics, when it comes to this, a lot of it comes down to the individual and not necessarily what you think of big, grand events that are beyond your own control, but how you as a human being treat people, what your values are. I like to think I'm a decent human being, but I don't want to be a saint. What I mean by that is I try to do the right thing. I try to do what is right for me, but I also put a lot of emphasis on empathy. And I actually think that a lot of anger that people feel over injustice, I know this is certainly true in my case, is actually stemming from empathy, a sympathy for the purported victim or victims. So it's anger, but it's also empathy. A lot of anger stems from that. Something people, it's something that's maybe underappreciated actually. So, for example, anger about crime stems from sympathy for what the victims go through because, if you're reading a report about some particularly awful crime and you get angry, it's not that you're personally being hurt. It's that you're thinking how awful it is for the victim. Hence, it's empathy. But what I'm driving at is that I think there's good and bad people in every country. I think in every society, you get a range of people. You get people are shaped by their society. I think that is very true. So if you live in a conservative, ultra religious society, you're going to have a different outlook on a lot of things than someone who lives in a secular, modern, democratic society, for example. And these are, I don't want people to read too much into these examples. They're just examples, but you are going to have a different outlook on life in a lot of ways. But there are certain fundamental human emotions that really are universal: anger, happiness, pain, suffering, hope, fears, and they're positive and negative emotions. And, we can look at how other people view the world and we might think, yeah, that person is despicable. That person is extreme. That person is a fanatic. That person is an idiot. I think that it's very, very difficult with the best intentions in the world not to judge others. Anyone that says they never judge others, I would strongly suspect that isn't true. I think people can be less judgmental than others, but I think judgment, honestly, is an inherent part of the human thinking because we put up other people against our standards of what is right and wrong. And it's very difficult to be a passive neutral observer in a lot of situations. Of course, you get people that don't like confrontation and wouldn't, seek an argument, but they'll still have their private thoughts. So, what's my message with this? I guess it's just that, and I've pointed this out before, I think if we're true to ourselves, we can be the best way we could be to other people in most circumstances. Obviously, if you're an ISIS fanatic and you're being true to yourself, that's not good because it hurts other people. But in most circumstances, I think that if you're true to yourself, if you try to be the best you can be, that's one way to make a better world. I mean, I often wonder, people who, I was thinking about this last night actually, people who do despicable things, when they go to bed at night, they may be escaping justice, they may be practically in a comfortable position, but when it all is quiet, when the crowd is gone, when they're just left alone with their own thoughts, I really wonder, are they confident with who they are? Are they content with who they are? I think most people are not overly content in life. I don't think there are many people that can say I'm 100% content. Most people want some improvement. They want to be out of some situation. particularly if they're going through a particular struggle. Um, so most people have those questions, but I think people who are particularly do particularly despicable things, and on the surface they seem to have no remorse. Maybe they don't have remorse. Maybe it's a way of self-preservation. But even if they don't have remorse, they are they comfortable? So they may escape justice. And I don't want to get religious here, but for those of us who believe that there is something more to life than the biological being of just, you know, you're you're made up of matter and you're made up of atoms and so on. There's something more there. Then it gets into, I don't want to say a theological question, but a philosophical question, which is, if not to try and do the right thing, then what is life's purpose? Is it just to procreate? Is it just to eat, to sleep, have a family, and then die? No, there has to be more to it. Has to be. Um, but what is that? That's the question. So anyway, it can be thoroughly depressing, I find, to overthink these things, to overthink about the problems the world has. I get super depressed when I think of the sort of human rights abuses and injustice that goes on out there. And sometimes it is very hard to understand human nature. It's very hard to understand why people do such evil things, why they hurt innocent people, why they take pleasure from torturing animals, why injustice happens in this world. But maybe that is a case for there being a greater meaning, because the flaws of this world, the pain of this world, if there's nothing else, then why do some people suffer more than others? Why are there corrupt multimillionaires that have very comfortable lives, and yet there's some kid working in a sweatshop for a pittance, or there's people with no roofs over their head? We could talk about the practical reasons why that happens, but what's the moral reasons? Why is there pain in this world? You know, you could write a thesis on why human beings do the things they do. But the caveat, of course, is for every act of evil, for every act of cruelty, for every inexplicable lack of justice, there are good things as well. There is also a lot of kindness. There is also a lot of human decency. And I think there is a massive amount of banality, just people living their lives day in, day out, as they live their lives. And they're not evil, they're not saints, they're just people. Now, that's not to say that I don't agree with those who say that everyone is just this vague grey medium. Oh, everyone has some good, everyone has some bad. I do believe that some people have a lot more bad than good, and perhaps some people have more good than bad. So I don't believe everyone is in this kind of happy grey medium. You cannot tell me, for example, that a child killer is in that happy grey medium. Oh, he has some good, because whatever fickling of good he or she has, that's the evil greatly outweighs that. So I don't believe in that happy grey medium. I don't. But I do think that the vast majority of people in every society are just living. They have aspirations, they have dreams, but there's 7 point, probably now 7.7 billion of us, right? And I think that we hear the expression "don't take yourself too seriously," um, and some people practice that to a fine art, others not so much. I think all you can really do in this world is your best, or at least something pushing towards your best. We can't always be super energetic, and I just think that you have to have some degree of rationality to know what is a red line, what are my red lines, what is one thing I will not do on a moral basis. And I think people who do despicable things, the problem lies in that they don't have a red line. They don't have that sort of self control, that sort of moral barometer of what is right and what is wrong. So to me, it's not about being virtue signaling, going for virtue signaling. It's just about what are you happy with in yourself. Now, for me, I know what my barometers are, and am constantly thinking I could be a better man than I am. But I don't want to be a saint. I don't want to be super righteous. I want to have flaws in a strange way because that's humanity. That's reality. Anyway, I'll round this up. I know it's quite a philosophical one, but let me know your thoughts. Do you think that people are shaped by their circumstances? Do you think that there is a greater meaning? And I don't mean to get into super religious territory with that one, but just, where do ethics and morals come from? Of course, again, this is something that can vary greatly from society to society. So, for example, a very conservative Islamic society, they genuinely believe that those two young people who were flogged in Aceh province yesterday, they were the evil people, and society is being righteous by punishing them. But to those of us, of course, who believe in human rights, that's the barbarism. So there can be a massive gulf between values depending on regional context. And that's striking. Now, for me, I'll just close with this. I do believe that human rights trumps any religious notions. For me, probably nothing is more important than human rights. But even that can be contentious. Because what's human rights to one person may be something else to someone else. Anyway, I hope it's some things for people to think about. Feel free to share the video and let me know your thoughts.